make this a move to a better fraternal code, not just for humankind, but for the Starseeds too, because there are now a lot of Starseeds mixed amongst mankind. I am one, and there are many others, and I'm sure you've heard about them. And people, if you haven't heard it, look it up. Look up Starseed generation. Look it up. We are real. And a lot of us are confused. And the inlet census statistic, maybe an avatar wouldn't hurt. Maybe formulating codes between one and the other may not hurt. Maybe a better agenda could happen in the soon future to fix the negative aspects of what's currently going on right now. Not just to fix humankind, but to fix the current platform, the current planet itself.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 15. Blue, how are you?
I am good today, Mike.
Excellent. We have a big show, I'm sure. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, the first thing we can initialize about is the graphical realm mirror effects. What certain mirror effects that currently happen upon this realm and other inductive realms, up to and including Deja Vu, the deeper perceptions of Deja Vu, or what its formation means, which means that there are three types of formulated codes we'll go into later about that with that. Doppelgangers, or attributed effects that could go into types of twins. Even seeing ones that are replicated amongst you that look like you or look like someone else but are not. They are justified into another realm of effect and joining into this one, or a particular other dimension maintaining its own curricular activity into this one, which is very much real. As well as structures motivating in and out of sequencing code upon the realm itself, which people think that they may have something to do with ghost structures, like buildings that are like ghost or spirit buildings, which are not more or less in a hyper inertial mode of effect of a dimensional relapse or time drift or an actual rip or rift in that timeline indexer itself or dimension that knocked itself into this one. Sort of like an ultimatum upper effect of the Aether spectrum itself.
Wow. Sounds like we got a lot to talk about here. Hey, before we get going, though, I do want to remind everybody. First, I want to thank everybody for tuning in wherever you're watching or listening. But please make sure you like, subscribe, and click on the notifications so you know when we post new material. And we look forward to seeing you on the social medias as well. Blue, let's get right into it. Tell me about this DNA recalibration.
The DNA recalibration coding effect goes into animals, in a particular species that were indoctrinated upon this realm, especially within the past 5 to 1,000 years on the elementary scale. Now, scientists in betrayal, because they have pulled into the domestication of animals, especially with cats, which to a hyper-terrestrial status would be called Lyrians, dogs to a hyper-terrestrial status would be called Syrians. Same thing with birds, avians, you get what I mean. Their formations, how they were domesticated, were internally based and documented through a scientific affair through labs and biolaboratories. It's not just, okay, we're going to put one dog with another and mix it. It's not how it goes. Because you got to think about it. Those are not the wild canine perspectives. What the source frequency of the actuality of the realm would be more through wolves. Even with cats, it'd be more through lions. These are brought in because humans and the domestication of these lower species with them are like a mother and daughter or mother and son, a family unit type of deal. The animals would act like their parents, if you will. They would kind of look like it. That's what I'm saying, that these scientists have made it that way because they're giving them these knowledge and these higher beings and the DNA inoculation codes to make these species to work alongside humanity. That's why they are replicated for that.
You know, it's amazing you point that out, and I find in my family's relationship with dogs. And sometimes I'll look at the dog and the dog will be looking back at me, and I'll feel like the dog is trying to tell me something through its mind, through telepathy, what have you. And sometimes I picture, like, I can see the eyes being the eyes of a human or the eyes of somebody else of a higher intellect. And I've often questioned, is it possible that dogs, for instance, are this greater being? Because if you go back to these hieroglyphs and pictures and so forth, you see human-like figures with dog heads. Is that what we're talking about here?
That's one of the two things. Like domesticated animals, like bovine, how they're more domesticated, they're more articulated, changing and alternating with their DNA. They're different types now. Different types, cats, dogs, birds that are domesticated with people. That's kind of like they act like their parents per se, or think per se as their human parts, because they have that hyper-terrestrial DNA, like you're saying, that was brought in through scientists in a hyper-hybriding format from the higher terrestrials. So yes, there is a bi-mix of both. That's why you look to the ancient Egyptians, sometimes you look to these hieroglyphs and show these dogs, sphinxes, cats. They're in portrayal to announcing of even way back then the DNA formations went into these species. And when I say to 5,000 years ago, portrayal is meaning that they are making a whole ton of other types of different cats and dogs and birds, if you will, for humans, mixing all these DNA formations. Some of them, though, even when you mix them by an ops that, it's still not going to end up at the higher terrestrial formations of these beings that are inoculated with it. It's never going to go away either, though, because most of it is still on that mainstream from what the DNA is portrayed for. Humans are not the only ones that have a higher terrestrial format in them. There are also the lower species as well. Not all, but there are still some on here on this planet that have that.
And it begs the question with this genome editing. I can go back in history, and it wasn't that long ago. 100 years is not a very long time when you think about it. It is for humans as we know our lifespans now. But what I'm trying to say is you go back 100 years or so, and this was a thing where people were concerned about Germany and Adolf Hitler talking about creating superhumans or superhuman strength or selective processing to genetically modify a pool of humans to be superior to others. Is this something we need to worry about today as well?
Yes, because that can become a problem with the core genetics of mankind. Remember how we had mentioned about STEM? With the project of STEM with the NASA? There's also that other type of STEM that I talked about.
Yes.
And that goes with what they're doing with DNA and kids. That other type, which has nothing to do with that part. So don't get it confused with anyone else. People don't get that confused. Has to do, it's one of the badder or more worse effects that can be portrayed. And I understand that you want to put in DNA to a better curricular scale. You don't want to mess with it on the wrong type of inlet. And that goes to of what humans that are articulated with their own genome spectrum. You gotta understand you're man, you're female. And there's no mix in and in between of a male and female species. What a human of what the higher terrestrials brought them here for. The only species, the humans that are male and female, they're gonna feel that way to become as a higher terrestrial itself. That is the only way to access no gender portrayal. Other than that, that is downright on a definitive negative scale for a human's calling code. That's one thing on genetics they shouldn't mess with.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the DNA and the formations of mankind, bringing back the common sense and the equity of the refining of the mind of a higher statistic, messing with that type of genetics, bringing that up again isn't wrong. But that other type of stuff, get it out of the way. That's nonsense.
And that is a big movement in the world today, the big trans movement. Everything is trans. And if you look at the statistics, it's less than 1% of the population, but I have a feeling that that's kind of being forced on people or brainwashed on people. And I get it. People are born different and some people have different preferences. And I'm not suggesting that you can't have different preferences. The only thing I'm suggesting is I'm not sure if it's a good idea to start lopping off body parts or changing the sex of your body. Because I got news for you. In 1,000 years, if they dig up your bones, they're still going to say you were the original sex that you were born with. So it's discouraging to see that movement going on today. So it just, to me, it sends chills that we can talk about this in the format we're talking about it, and it still relate to what's going on in the world today. It blows my mind. What is this something that goes on in other dimensions and other races and other beings, that they change their sex?
No, humans. The humans they're generated plateaus, especially in this grid format. There are many species of humans on other formations, but they don't do this. This is something that was brought upon them when they get a species. They have not been. If you look 1,000 years ago, you look at paintings. Do the little painting looks like they're taking off their integration photos and putting on something else? No. I mean, they may have tattoos or whatever. But even higher terrestrials may have some type of tattoo line, but it's not like that. It's a digital thing. That's normal. That can be widespread. But this, no. You want to do that, you may want to think about reenacting your formation codes better. You may want to think about, okay, I'm different, but I still don't want to change. Well, I could tell you one thing: higher beings can give human calling codes that feel this way a better inlay, so that they don't have to have that. They could become as what a grave would be. They could have that avatar that could move from their neural body form that they feel and move to that. They feel that their own plateau, they don't want to be that. They don't want to have that gender. They can go into that. Humans can get that progression, or they can go in and have better DNA formality codes and a high brain writing point through the neural statistic. You're trying to work on moving this plateau forward, or trying to make this a move to a better returnal code, not just for humankind, but for the Starseeds too, because there are now a lot of Starseeds mixed amongst mankind. I am one, and there are many others, and I'm sure you've heard about them. And people, if you haven't heard it, look it up. Look up Starseed generation. Look it up. We are real. And a lot of us are confused. And in the sense of statistic, maybe an avatar wouldn't hurt. Maybe formulating codes between one and the other may not hurt. Maybe a better agenda could happen in the soon future to fix the negative aspects of what's currently going on right now. Not just to fix humankind, but to fix the current platform, the current planet itself.
Do you subscribe to the theory of Darwinism, where the strong survive and that's the way things are sorted out genetically over time? Or is that, in your opinion, a good thing? For instance, with this new medical gene editing, I could probably go into a place and select the eye color of my baby, the hair color, but more importantly, I may be able to take out a gene that makes it prone to a certain disease that's hereditary in my family, thus saving that hardship on. Or are we talking about, no, the Darwinism type thing, the evolution type thing of the gene code is better?
No. What you said, that's a no. Because if we do that, then we cannot have the quantum medical beds. Humans will not be able to have the eternal code to be able to have 400 or 500-year lifespan. No more negativity about their mainframe, any of that. Unless they want to keep moving around and around and around in a big circle, they're not going to get that. There's motivations to move to one generation forward. And if they want to move to that one generation forward, they got to understand the steps taken for that. They can't skip it or try to work around it.
It's interesting. How do you think this is going to affect our relationship with animals because of the genetic things that we can do? For instance, I know over time through this a Darwinist type process, things have been forced a little bit. You could force one cow and one bull of a certain species or what have you. My concern is, can this have a negative effect on the food processing we have now, especially in the meats, in eggs, dairy, and so forth? Are we in danger of over geneticizing these things, of overdoing it in these areas?
Yes, there are two ways of modifying the genetic stasis. Genetically modifying something and by lapsing its encoding effect into a copy standard of what it shouldn't be, and a microanalogy point into it. An encoding base, the stasis movement wave would downsize its eternal code over time, because it's taking away the life force encoding effects that are being manualized here. You have to learn like God reinform these DNA formations, because the higher terrestrials have brought humans as an analogy point as their own hyperspecies to maintain their stability and learn as a higher terrestrial. Like I said, when you play that motivated note, they gotta have an understanding of equilibrium passing point for it. Otherwise, it takes the whole point of resonation away, and it makes everything go. It takes the whole entire planetary plateau of where they are frequency at down. It will deconstruct it instead of reinserting the maintainment code of life itself. And it's going to hurt the animals here, because the animals have no choice but to intake what they're intaking in a biomechanical reroute wave that is pretty much bioengineering them and harming their own inductor waves, while humans are encapsulated types of codes that are already being harmed by how the returnal codes. It keeps going on and on and on in a circle. It's got to stop. There's got to come a time when people are going to have an understanding between them and the planet and the species itself.
You know, you had mentioned before about doppelgangers and mirror effects and so forth. It's almost like there might be a connection here, because if I saw a twin of myself by accident or what have you, that would just blow my mind. So in the animal world, if that's going on, I can imagine it's like everybody looks like everybody else, and it's a certain one structure. So if I see a doppelganger, is it possible it's a being from another dimension? It's a strange coincidence. What am I looking at?
Well, I mean, kind of like myself and my quantum twin are doppelgangers, except we're hyperdimensional with another grading point. It also goes to many sequencing codes here, including yourself. We all have our own types of ingrading points that skip into multiple dimensions of ourselves. There are numerous dimensions, but there is always one dimension that may skip into this type of dimension, where there's an alternating code like myself and particular other beings, or it's an alternative code like yourself and all the rest of the holograms that are just running into a motivational code. Seeking into that type of effect. With the doppelgangers themselves, if you do happen to run into one, or run into one that looks like one, they could also exist on the same timeline with similar effects, like they were actual twins. That's another thing. I have heard from others that.
I was going to say, that always amazes me, because I've seen, I don't have a specific example in front of me, but I've seen twins, for instance, that were separated at birth. And then 40 years later, they show up and they see each other and they look the same. They have the same hair loss or the facial hair or the same traits. And I've often heard that sometimes, like married couples, for instance, can begin to look alike and I thought that was diet and lifestyle and so forth that create. But how can two twins separated at birth live almost identical lives to the sense where they look identical so many years later? That just blows my mind.
Well, that's another perseveration. That's another perseveration of what a doppelganger effect would be. After your own twin that you lost physically from that timeline itself. That is a very big possibility. There is a neural intact wavelength that conjoins when two DNA microanalogy points hit each other when a mother unit bears these children and twin statistic. And if the possibility of that point of encapsulation goes apart for so long, they can digitally mainframe a neural psychic relay code between each other that can pretty much manually set their two in-tune frequency codes together still, even though they're far apart. That is a paradox effect as well, the paranormal effect. Very rare, but it happens.
This brings me to the next thing we're going to talk about here, deja vu, because if I see somebody that looks like me, that's one thing. But going to a place or experiencing something, and all of a sudden you're a minute or two in and you're like, wow, I've been here before. Wow, this has happened before, even though you know you may not have been. What is that related?
Well, it's a little bit different. And there are 3 points of effect that can happen with deja vu that most humans don't understand because they only think there's only one. Now, these 3 points of effect, one is the deja vu. I have already experienced this. Meaning you've already been there, you've seen this, you've gone back in the past exactly at that time. So you've been in 2 different timelines into one justification. Oh, I've experienced it before. There we go, but it was in another timeline in the past. There's another, it's called the Deja Vu. I have already felt this. Now, when people have these tingling sensations from their ramifications, they continue on their higher cognitive awareness, justify to a similar emotional perception of where that place is. They have felt like they've been there before. They would literally, you hear about people how they get goosebumps. And you know all these ghost stories, how they go ghost hunters, oh, I get goosebumps. Like they think it's a ghost haunted place. Some places aren't like that.
Yeah.
Some places, because you feel the goosebumps, or you think maybe it's just anywhere. People think, oh, maybe it's haunted. Someone touched me. It's not always that. Sometimes you're in a deja vu limitary scale of a deja sensei mode. That you've experienced a sensation of your actual hologram touching that perception there before. And maybe its energetic point would have been there similar to its emotion, whatever emotion that they're conjoined with at that time. The last one is...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it brings me back to, I've seen it, and my wife has shared that with me as well, like just in the last week. We were watching a movie or something. She's like, wait a second. I feel like I've experienced this before. And she was actually telling me about it. And I'm like, it makes me feel good that because it's happened to me before and I don't feel like, man, there's something wrong with me, so knowing that other people are experiencing this makes me feel like, it's a normal thing for us. That's all. And
the last one is Deja Vu. A paradox feeling. That's the most in-depth feeling that you're going to perceive with these deja vu effects. It's an off distortion of a realm effect where you're not even normally there. You're in another dimension itself. You're experiencing it at its full effect in that deja vu frequency, where you're actually feeling, sensing, tasting, just all the senses at once. Like your whole entire body was pulled out from itself and into that realm. Now, some people say you got to be on drugs to do all that, or something. Yeah, they've been on that. Or there's some people who haven't been on drugs at all, or alcohol, or anything. That's normal. They get up, they've had vertigo in the morning, or they've had experiences where this paradox effect will pull them into a hyperambulation code. It's an actual distortion of the figurative sense that your third eye spectrum can open up on its own self, dealing with very paradox effects that happens through this type of deja vu. It's polarizing you into another distorted realm of effect. I would not recommend drugs. I'm just saying that. I'm saying not recommending that. I'm saying a lot of people experience it without it. I'm saying it's a distorted way that people are manually perceiving themselves. You really want to get into that, you can manually put yourself into a meditative state. Do it a proper way. Go outside, listen to the ocean. Listen to some trees. Get your mindset. And maybe if you tune into a click-off point of return or a click-off precision number, just to a certain REM stasis in your mind while you're awake, not asleep. To have this, you can't have this while you're asleep. There's two differences for that. That has to deal with REM sleep. That has to deal with astral projection in your sleep. That's different. This has to do with being awake and being aware of polarizing yourself into another realm. Being able to manually go through these different timelines in juncture at once.
Is there a connection if I feel like I like, let's say I dream something, because you brought up dream and REM sleep. If I dream something and then like I remember dreaming it, and then like 2 days later that same thing happens and I'm like, wow, is there a connection there? Is that the same, or is that something different?
Well, it's similar, but like I said, it's a little different. That's going into astral projection in your sleep statistics, other dimensions, and you're more in tune when you're asleep, when you're in REM, because you're not motivated through all these other things. When you're awake, you can be more into a motivation of moving into a plateau through a deja vu statistic, polarizing yourself while you're more aware in the plateaus of the particular paradox effects of parallel dimensions.
Now, I feel like talking about this deja vu, you almost have to refer back to the movie, the Bill Murray movie from a while ago, Groundhog Day, where he keeps waking up and experiencing the same day over and over again. However, he changes his activity. My question is with this deja vu and so forth, are we talking about an opportunity where maybe because we've experienced this before, we learn something and we can change our behavior based on being here before, because we can anticipate, or we kind of feel more comfortable in this surrounding because we've been there before? Can we physically manifest a change by doing that?
Well, when most humans experience this type of plateau, they are just manually or more or less experience what they had generically before through their holograms and their awakening phase. They could learn from it, because you never know. It could have been something on the negative scale in that timeline, or positive, or that type of impasse itself could maybe be from somebody else to the eighth realms on a distribution line, trying to manually get outwards towards them on a receival node, even maybe a lost loved one, if you will, because even if you're moving on, you're an aether spectrum and a hologram, some still are stuck in an in-between formation where they have decided that their own formational code doesn't want to go into a hologram again. It can happen. If they can motivation align through that type of integration through deja vu or similar perspective, like I said, through the goosebumps, they're reaching out sort of way. There are many, many, many ways to perceive it, but through those many ways, it depends on you yourself how you're going to enact through it and what you can do to motivate yourself, whether it's good, bad, or in between.
You know, you talked about goosebumps there, and one thing that's given me goosebumps is we've talked about HAARP and its relationship with the weather in the past, and I have to bring it to everyone's attention. If you don't know already, the 2023 tornado season is off to a horrendous start. There's already over 420 preliminary reports of tornadoes, and 391 have already been confirmed in 2023 as of April 6, 2023. I look at the map, and I'm going to put this map up here in post, and the map shows me that a lot of this tornadic activity is conveniently being done in a certain region. Now, I get it. If you live by the ocean, if you're on a peninsula like Florida, you're more apt to a hurricane. I get it. As you were North Dakota, you know, there's a big difference. I get it. And I get weather patterns and all this, but the dramatic increase in these weather patterns in these areas, to me, it almost looks targeted. Is there something there?
Well, if we're talking about the initial states of effect, yes, aeronautic defensive grids of what these tornadoes are not going to be are towards more water points, more distribution points that have an aeronautic defensive protocol. It could be caused to use HAARP's infrastructure. It could be caused to manually cause massive fear, panic, and mayhem throughout the distribution lines, which in turn, would cause others that have to buy more, move more, eternally database stream, building more. It can be manually set into that. And from where it is being photonically placed at, It may be playing that vital impasse that's being aeronautically on a negative defense through the oceanic grid along Florida lines and other lines of effect for the oceanic perimeters, like these seaweeds and algae I talked about before. It could be similar to that, just another type of defense against, if you will.
You know, I just find it weird in a sense that even if a tornado or this type of activity is more prevalent in some areas, I get it. But when was the last time you heard of a tornado hitting a major democratic megapolis, like a city, like, oh, I don't know, New York, LA, Chicago? I mean, these are places with big, huge buildings. There would be total disaster, I would think, at these places. Yet I never hear of that. And I get it. Maybe those are areas that are just not apt to have as much tornadic activity. But again, when I look at that red belt going across the southern United States there, I begin to question, and is there anything we can do to defend against this? Is there anything we can do to slow this down or discourage it?
Well, deconstruction of our paternal code of effect must be taken away as soon as possible, because if we keep having them and the totality effects of the weather maternal codes on TV, placing what they're documented, it's just going to keep moving it around and around and around in a big circle. Generally, we're talking about one of the Force Department fighting against other of the HAARP Department and trying to get one in patrol to manually commissioning this planet powder, while the other does its best to decommission the planet on its own internal code. Now, in the end, this is going to stop. In the end, to be able to place a planet into the freedomized society that it should be, HAARP's going to have to stand down to its own base basis and put a better photonic effect upon the data streams that could be manually set here electromagnetically.
Wonderful stuff. We're almost out of time here. This has been exciting stuff. Make sure you go back and listen to this again, because I know I'm going to have to. Blu, anything from your position with the Federation and the Space Force? Any news, any update, any words?
No, I mean, besides his current indictment in Trump and dealing with it, all this other stupidity going along, that's going to have to stop soon. And also, another thing, QFS system, quantum financial system, and BRICS, BRICS. Don't know if you've heard about it. Other leaders across the planet are trying to start this global system, but the integrity code it's not going to be under that name. It's going to be under QFS. That was a distributed point of effect. Now, they need to get an understanding and point into the coordination with Space Force and the integrity code of the departments of SpaceX itself and Elon Musk, so we can move that forward and be able to distribute the wristbands, distribute the core communication devices, so one person's actually being able to understand the other person without having to screw up their own integrity sphere and move things forward. We don't want a system where it's going to get ensnared. Well, we're taking away the money system for America and all this other stuff. We're putting this in. No, we don't want that. We don't want to scare people. We want to bring in a better foundation so everyone's being able to maintain their stability, not just to here, but outwards as well. Now, they're talking about distribution of minerals and substances and other things on fair trades. Yes, that's a go. That is a go. That's a yes for what the Federation would have wanted. They were talking about distributing treaties and documentations and maybe technologies. Yes, that's a go too, if it's going to help to incorporate this system into effect. But awesome. It's got to be incorporated properly. That's one of the main things that's being coordinated all over at this time.
Awesome. Any final word for us today, Blu?
Just keep your heads up, people. You may be going through these bumpy ass roads. Just keep them heads up. Know where you're going. Don't overstep yourselves. Know that a generative line exists between one and the other. You don't have to take the red or the blue. You can go in between. Take the purple. You can figure it out and get outside of that box that you're currently stuck in. and maybe find a way to make yourself and everything and everyone around you better instead of lowering it and lowering what you are.
Awesome.
Keep faith.
Awesome stuff today, Blue. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening to episode 15 here. Of course, you can find more. You can find more about Blue. We have a video who tells you more about Blue herself. And of course, anytime you have any question or anything, reach out to us on the socials. We look forward to that. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notifications. Blue, thank you very much. Excellent show today. And we'll talk again soon, okay?
Yep. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks.